Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy M.K.S here, back at you another video, and welcome to part 3, the third and penultimate part of my dreams, I suppose, to help Roma to become world class and the new Galacticos. I forgot to put the extra lights on, so I hope this video is bright enough. I also forgot to do a thumbnail where I was going to just have my tea because it's part 3, so due to my patterns and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, so this is part 3, and it's the third and penultimate part. So I hope you'll look out for part 4, and I hope you'll check out parts 1 and 2 if you haven't already seen them. Before I start the list of ideas or thoughts or plans number 21 to 30, I would love to ask, how do you think the club, can't read my own type in there. How do you think the club can get the best possible players, I think is what I was trying to say, whilst also developing good young players? So how can they give young players opportunities whilst also buying the best possible players in the world from all around the world? That's one thing I'd love to ask. And do you think Italy, generally, including Rome, could produce the next best players, the next Messi, Ronaldo, ×2 Brazilian and Portuguese version, and whatnot? I think by utilising migrants and working with migrants and bringing them into the academy, maybe they can do similar to what France and other nations have done, especially France. I suppose Brazil's has benefited from migration, at least football-wise, over history, and France more recently. And hopefully the club can learn from France, Brazil, and other places all around the world, actually, and Real Madrid itself, on that note. So I hope they can learn from national teams, club teams, and other sports even, and from the business and from the universe itself, from the world and that kind of thing. Anyway, here goes. So number 21. Another thing, I was going to say this in the intro, but I thought, as I say, 21 again. And another thing I was thinking about is in part 2, I didn't mention about how I went to the dentist. I had my dentist appointment before I made part 2 of this video, of this list. But anyway, I thought it was a bit off topic and I didn't want to go through the story. But if anyone wants to hear my story about my trip to the dentist, please let me know in the comments. And again, any thoughts you have. To recap some points, and I keep forgetting this one, but in point number 17, I often think of like imagine-ifs or imagination, using my imagination. And there was something I was going to say about it, and I've completely forgotten again. I keep remembering and then forgetting. So ironically, I've forgotten in point number 21. But again, I would love for the club to have the best possible players. Damn my memory sometimes. The best possible players in all possible positions, and that memory has completely eluded me. Yeah, I'd love for the club. It was something else I was going to say, but I've completely forgotten. I would love for the club to have the best possible, as I said before, like best possible goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, strikers, and that kind of thing, including on the bench. But it's a bit of a difficult balance between producing great young players, by giving them opportunities and things like that, and having great players from overseas. It's difficult because I want to make sure they get game time. So even developing them in the academies and giving them opportunities and having football pitches, it is difficult to get the balance right for short and long-term success. I suppose most businesses with what a football club is struggle with that, and I'm really frustrated that I've forgotten that point, which I just remembered just before I made the video, but before I was about to make the video. But there's a few things I forgot. I forgot to put the lighting on, I forgot to do the thumbnail, and I've forgotten the other thing I was going to say. Or mention. But also on the subject of 21 again, and I was wanting to recap some ideas, but again, they've eluded me. I would love for people to find out the history about Roma, AS Roma, like any facts about and stats from its history, like when it was founded, what the nickname means, and things like that. I'd love for the club to have many nicknames, as I mentioned in part 1. Anyway, moving on, number 22, I dream that the club will have so many academies for the future and and have so much investment where they can keep buying the best possible players. And it'd be great, as I say, if the club could work with FIFA and UEFA, maybe on some deals, like saying if Roma helps to tackle poverty or do a lot for charity, do football for good, promote a positive image of football, tackle corruption and crime through football, make sure they stick within the law, and discuss with Roma, with FIFA and UEFA and football bodies generally, especially FIFA and UEFA, about what's the most money they can acquire and reinvest within the rules and things like that. I would love to see the club get loads of money. And I've just remembered what I was going to say in point number 21, which is it reminds me of when people collect stickers. I think Panini is one of the companies. I don't know if there's others as well. I think Panini might be the only one. I don't know. You can let me know if anyone knows that. But they collect. Not that I do this myself because I'm too old for it, honest. But when people collect, especially young people normally collect, or those who are young at heart, collect stickers of the best possible players. And also when you play a game, my late aunt, Pat, she got me a video game or console. I call them video games, so it shows my age. Console game, if you like, for you youth out there, because I'm quite old. But where you could buy players. So if you won competitions, you'd win prize money, and then you could buy players. And I decided to play as Inter Milan for some reason, and I bought. I wanted to pick any Italian team, so I just picked Inter Milan. Decided on Inter Milan, and I bought the best possible players, like at the time Zidane and people like that, in the video game. So I love that to be almost like a real life sort of thing where Roma. I think someone was talking about it with Real Madrid, and they said it's almost like someone picked the best players in the sticker collection or things like. Or again, it could be a video game or console where you get to pick the best players. I would love for Roma to do that in real life. That's a dream, I suppose, which is what these videos are specifically about. Which any points I've forgotten to make, I hope to cover in future videos. I hope to do quite a few on Roma, and any money they do make in the future, if they do make any money, if I do get to monetize my channel eventually, I plan to donate to Roma. But again, I'd love for it to be like a sticker collection or video game or console or whatever you want to call it, where the club can buy the best possible players around the world, people like Mbappe, Haaland, and maybe even players I haven't even heard of, up and coming players, especially young ones, but even older players. So the new version or the upcoming version of Messi, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, and people like that in the future. Talking of which as well, I dream that former players at the club will be. I often say this with Italian teams and Celtic, I suppose. I would love for former players to be club ambassadors for the club, brand ambassadors and that kind of thing, which is what a football team is. It's kind of a brand, whether people like that or not. I know some people don't like there being too much money in football, but you can probably tell I don't mind that myself. In fact, I kind of like Italian team, as long as it's for Italian team and Celtic. But yeah, to be coaches for the youth, so ambassadors and coaches. I'd love for all Italian teams and Celtic also to do that. Number 23, I'll say as much funding and sponsorship and investment as possible. And again, as I mentioned in part 2, with great power comes great responsibility. I would love for the club to give a lot of money towards good causes, improve the image of football, again, work with FIFA, work with FIFA's foundation, UEFA Foundation, and charities and NGOs generally, and look at the more money the club gets, the more money the club can donate to parts of Africa, Asia, Latin America, developing nations, supporting entrepreneurs in those nations, and all sorts of things like that. And hopefully, in return, the club can get, from a selfish point of view, can get the money to reinvest. I realise this video has gone on quite long, but I do hope people out there will enjoy it, especially Roma fans, as I would say, listening to my mad imagination. But so yeah, hopefully the club can bring in loads of investment, but at the same time, the more investment the club gets, even though they can use it to buy great players and things like that, spend billions on the squad, on the team and the squad, as long as they do it legally and don't get fines and stuff like that, and it has longevity. Big word for me, ironically, but I hope they'll do a lot for charity as well. Number 24, I would love for the Italian government, I think it has a sovereign wealth fund called CDP Equity or something like that, and given my alliterations and patterns and things like generally, in this case, more the latter, CDP for Roma, I would love, in other words, I would love for CDP, whatever that stands for, to invest in the club and help it to buy academies. So the Italian government, as well as like politicians, especially local politicians, which I would love for all Italian clubs, especially Roma and Genoa, as it's Italy's oldest club as well. So I'd love for them to get investment, and all Italian teams, I say, have similar ideas again for Celtic. But as I say, I would love for local and national and even national politicians, political parties and whatnot, to invest in football development. So Roma could have, as well as to benefit the club, it will benefit the country as well. So I dream that they'll invite investors into the country, talk to investors on Zoom, have investment events and sponsorship drives and summits and whatnot, and basically just bring investment into spaces and places for sport, places and spaces for practicing and playing football. Specifically, I say sport, but I mean football in this case, and for people from Rome, and also from all over Italy to practice as much as possible. And again, I'd love for this to happen in many Italian cities, but I would love for Rome to be the main place where they would get those football pitches to produce the next Messi, Ronaldo, and people like that. And to have a better memory. To have Italy's own answer to St. George's Park, which England has, or La Fontaine, or whatever it's called in France, which produces great players like Zidane, I think, and people like that, and so many great players, Henry, and so many great French players. I say I'd love for Italy to have as many of those pitches, stadiums, and academies as possible. For some reason, I put academies in speech marks. I don't know why. Anyway, moving on, number 25. I was going to include this in point number 24, but I thought that point went on a bit too long. I probably couldn't think of many ideas for point number 25. But again, any legal investment, and I would love for maybe the PIF, Dubai to invest in Roma, Qatar to invest in Roma, Qatar Sports Investments for Roma, and all possible investors, investment groups, investment vehicles, investment firms, and that sort of thing, especially ones that begin with R, but also places like Dubai, Qatar, Saudi Arabia through the PIF, if they can, or even using different names. Again, making sure they do it legally. But as much investment as possible. And I'd love for a controversial idea here, but I don't agree with wars or whatever, but I think it's unfair that Russia was targeted for sanctions when so many other nations like America or the UK and others have gone to war. And I'd love for Italy to be military neutral. So I'd love for them to be able to acquire investment even from Russia, and basically all possible nations around the world, as long as they can do so legally within the rules, working with FIFA, UEFA, and the international community, make sure they don't break any rules and infringe those rules so that they won't face sanctions like points deductions, fines, inability to sign players, which would defeat the object, or I would defeat quite a lot of the object of what I dream to do. Although developing youth would be another avenue they could go into. But as long as they don't, also especially don't get relegated or things like that. So if they could work with FIFA and UEFA and say, in return, as I say, for giving to charity, improving the image of football. Although I've got to admit, if I'm honest, I know some people probably wouldn't like the fact that there's so much money involved, but if a lot of it goes to good causes, I hope that they can find ways around it. Number 26, I'd love for Roma. I think it'd be quite a coincidence, given the Empire, the Roman Empire in history. I would love for Roma to give back to countries that were colonized, and also support anti-imperial projects. I think that'd be quite an irony, and anti-racist projects. Again, I know I talked about this before, but tackle hooliganism and crime and violence generally, especially violent crimes, but even crimes generally, giving young people things to do, for instance, getting young people into football and hopefully keeping them out of trouble. As a club, discouraging crime. Instead of the ultras using hooliganism and getting involved in fights, they could donate to the club. Local businesses could donate to the club as well as citizens and the famous fans and things like that. Number 27, I hope to salute the club's heroes. Number 28, talking about famous fans, Dan Friedkin, the current owner of Roma, who's been an owner for a while, well, for a few years, I think 2 or 3 years or something like that, maybe a bit longer than that. But anyway, he's in the film industry, and I think it would be interesting if he could get people like Leonardo DiCaprio, even Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, and other Hollywood actors and actresses to get into soccer, as Americans would call it. I think that would be an interesting idea, and see if they could invest in Roma and learn about soccer, or as we would call it here in the UK, obviously football, as they call it in Italy, calcio. I also love the term footy, but any terms you want to use. But as I say, getting those celebrities to support Roma and invest in the club and get into soccer. And I know I often mention how there's rules on ownership, so you can't own more than one team in the same competition. But I think because Wrexham, who are owned by embarrassing moment, I forgot the owner's name. Brain's not doing well at the moment, but yeah, because they're owned by that really famous guy whose name I can't remember, but they're in a different division, and they're not likely to get into the Champions League or things like that, so they're unlikely to play against each other, which means there won't be that conflict of interest. I think that's why you're not allowed to own different teams in the same competition. I hope he doesn't get offended that if he sees these videos that I forgot his name, if this one in particular, but if to get people like him to invest in Roma like they did with Wrexham. So I'd love for Roma to have as many co-owners, shareholders, equity holders and whatnot as possible. So even if some pull out for whatever reason, the club would still have investors, and also it would hopefully they won't pull out and there'll be more money available. So again, getting Hollywood stars and maybe even Bollywood stars, Nollywood stars and people like that, famous people, celebs and all that kind of thing from all around the world, even not just America or the UK or whatever, even, but all around the world to invest in the club. At number 29, I'd love to see what neurodiverse people can do for the club, and also my fellow Eurasian support town teams like Roma as well as Celtic. And number 30, as ever, I would love to hear your opinions. What do you think about my ideas? How do they get the balance right between youth development and bringing in the best possible players from all around the world? If the club gave to charity, do you think they should be able to legally bypass financial fair play and get billions of pounds? Bear in mind, the more money they get, the more they can also not just spend on buying better players in the academies, but the more they could spend on improving the world for people in Rome and across Italy and also all around the world. And also, there was another point I was going to say, but I've forgotten again. How do I improve my memory? That's another question I'd love to ask. But how do they get the balance right between developing the youth and bringing in the best possible players, and any other ideas that could perhaps benefit Roma? And again, this is a point I was going to make, actually, I just remembered. What do you think about the idea of them bringing in the best possible players from around the world, a bit like a computer game or a video game console, whatever you want to call it, where the more money you get, the better players you can buy, or a sticker collection and putting the best possible players in that. Anyway, I do waffle, I'm sorry. But yeah, I'd love to know what you think. And I'm out.